Picture this. You're constantly saying yes to everyone, always picking up the phone, always there when people need you. You think you're being a good person, right? But what if I told you that your endless availability is actually destroying your relationships, your self-worth, and your entire life? Carl Jung, one of history's most brilliant psychologists, discovered something that will completely flip your understanding of human relationships on its head. When you stop being available to everyone, everything changes. Not just a little bit, everything. Your relationships transform. People start respecting you differently. Opportunities begin flowing toward you. And paradoxically, you become more valuable to everyone around you. This isn't some modern self-help nonsense. This is deep psychological truth that Jung uncovered through decades of studying the human psyche. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your availability is sabotaging your life, and how Jung's profound insights can revolutionize the way you interact with the world. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most successful, respected, and genuinely happy people have mastered the art of strategic unavailability. And more importantly, you'll know exactly how to apply this in your own life starting today. Let's start with a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. Imagine two friends, Sarah and Mike. Sarah is always available. She answers every text immediately, says yes to every invitation, drops everything when someone needs help. Mike, on the other hand, takes time to respond, carefully considers his commitments, and sometimes says he's busy even when he isn't. Guess which one people respect more? Guess which one people actually want to spend time with more? If you guessed Mike, you're absolutely right. And Jung understood exactly why this happens. Jung called this phenomenon the shadow of availability. When we're constantly available, we're not actually being generous or kind. We're operating from a place of fear, insecurity, and desperate need for approval. We're terrified that if we're not always there, people will abandon us, forget about us, or realize we're not as important as we think we are. But here's the twisted irony. By being constantly available, we guarantee that people will take us for granted, lose respect for us, and eventually push us away. Think about your own life for a moment. Who do you respect more? The friend who drops everything every time you call, or the one who sometimes says they're busy but gives you their full attention when they are available? The answer is obvious, isn't it? We inherently value what's scarce and take for granted what's abundant. This is basic human psychology, and Jung understood it better than almost anyone. But this goes much deeper than just social dynamics. Jung discovered that our relationship with availability reveals something profound about our psychological state. When we can't say no, when we can't create boundaries, when we can't tolerate the discomfort of potentially disappointing someone, we're actually revealing a fundamental lack of self-respect and inner security. Jung wrote extensively about the concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who others want you to be. Constant availability is the enemy of individuation. It keeps you trapped in a reactive state, always responding to other people's needs and desires rather than creating your own path. You become a reflection of everyone else's expectations rather than an authentic individual with your own purpose and direction. Here's where it gets really interesting. Jung observed that when people finally learn to withdraw their availability, they often go through what he called a psychological death and rebirth. The old people-pleasing version of themselves dies, and a more authentic, powerful version emerges. But this process isn't comfortable. In fact, it can be terrifying. When you first start being less available, people will react strongly. They'll be confused, frustrated, maybe even angry. The people who are used to your constant accessibility will push back hard. They might accuse you of being selfish, uncaring, or different, and you know what? They're right about the different part. You are becoming different. You're becoming the person you were meant to be rather than the person you thought you had to earn love and acceptance. Jung called this resistance the collective shadow. Society has a vested interest in keeping certain people constantly available and accommodating. It makes the social machine run more smoothly when some individuals sacrifice their own needs for the comfort and convenience of others. But Jung realized that this sacrifice comes at an enormous psychological cost. Let me share a specific example of how this plays out in modern relationships. Consider romantic partnerships where one person is always available and the other maintains some mystery and independence. Which dynamic creates more passion, more respect, more genuine connection? The research is clear. Relationships where both partners maintain some degree of independence and unavailability are significantly healthier, more passionate, and longer lasting than those where one person is constantly accessible. This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about recognizing a fundamental truth about human psychology. We value what we can't fully possess or control. When you're always available to your romantic partner, you remove the element of choice from the relationship. They're not choosing to spend time with you. They're just defaulting to your constant presence. There's no excitement, no anticipation, no sense that this time together is special because it could have gone to someone or something else. Jung understood that healthy relationships require what he called creative tension. Both people need to maintain their individual identity, their own interests, their own sense of purpose beyond the relationship. When one person becomes constantly available, they collapse into the other person's reality and lose themselves in the process. But romantic relationships are just one area where this principle applies. Let's talk about professional life. Think about the most successful people you know. Are they constantly available to everyone who wants their time and attention? Of course not. They're selective about their availability because they understand that their time and attention are their most valuable resources. Jung observed that people who can't protect their energy and attention inevitably burn out and become resentful. They give and give and give until they have nothing left, and then they wonder why they feel empty and unappreciated. The answer is simple. They trained everyone around them to expect constant availability, so their occasional absence feels normal while their presence becomes invisible. Here's a counterintuitive truth that Jung discovered. When you become less available, you don't lose relationships. You filter them. The relationships that were based solely on your convenience and accessibility will fade away. But those weren't real relationships anyway. The people who truly value you will respect your boundaries and appreciate your time even more when you do choose to share it with them. This filtering process is actually one of the most valuable aspects of reducing your availability. You quickly learn who in your life sees you as a person worth respecting versus who sees you as a resource to be consumed. Jung called this the great sorting. When you stop being constantly available, people reveal their true intentions and feelings about you. Now, let's get practical. How do you actually implement this in your life? Jung wasn't just interested in theory. He was deeply concerned with practical application. The first step is recognizing that your constant availability is a choice, not a virtue. You've been conditioned to believe that saying no is selfish, that disappointing others is cruel, that your own needs matter less than everyone else's convenience. Start small. Don't answer every text message immediately. Let phone calls go to voicemail sometimes, even when you're free. When someone asks for your time, get in the habit of saying, "Let me check my schedule and get back to you," instead of automatically saying yes. These might seem like tiny changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own time and energy. Jung emphasized the importance of what he called holding the tension. When you first start becoming less available, you'll feel guilty, anxious, worried that people will think less of you. Don't rush to relieve this discomfort by reverting to your old patterns. Sit with the discomfort. Learn to tolerate the anxiety of potentially disappointing someone. This tolerance is the foundation of psychological maturity and authentic self-respect. One of the most profound insights Jung offered is that our relationships are mirrors of our internal state. If you don't respect your own time and energy, why would you expect others to respect them? If you don't believe you're worth waiting for, why would anyone else believe it? Your external relationships can only be as healthy as your internal relationship with yourself. This is where the real transformation happens. As you become more selective with your availability, you start developing a stronger sense of self. You begin to understand your own needs, desires, and boundaries more clearly. You stop defining yourself through other people's approval and start developing genuine self-respect based on your own values and standards. Jung called this process the development of the conscious personality. Instead of unconsciously reacting to everyone else's demands and expectations, you become conscious of your choices and intentional about how you spend your time and energy. This consciousness is the foundation of all psychological health and authentic success. But here's something Jung discovered that most people miss. Becoming less available doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. In fact, the opposite is true. When you're more selective about your availability, the time you do choose to give becomes more valuable, more focused, more genuinely helpful. You're not spreading yourself so thin that you're only half present for everyone. Think about it this way. Would you rather have a friend who's always available but distracted, tired, and resentful, or a friend who's sometimes busy but gives you their full attention and energy when they are available? The choice is obvious. Quality over quantity isn't just a cliche. It's a fundamental principle of healthy relationships. Jung also understood that there's a spiritual dimension to this transformation. Many wisdom traditions speak about the importance of solitude, of withdrawing from the constant demands of social life to reconnect with your deeper self. When you're constantly available to others, you have no time or space for this inner work. You become alienated from your own thoughts, feelings, and intuition. Regular periods of unavailability aren't selfish. They're necessary for psychological and spiritual health. Jung spent considerable time alone, reflecting, writing, exploring his own psyche. He understood that this inner work wasn't separate from his relationships with others. It was the foundation that made authentic relationships possible. Here's another crucial point. Becoming less available often reveals addictive patterns in your relationships. Some people in your life aren't actually interested in you as a person. They're addicted to your attention, your validation, your constant emotional support. These people will react most strongly when you start setting boundaries because you're disrupting their psychological supply. Jung observed that healthy relationships can tolerate space, boundaries, and individual autonomy. Unhealthy relationships require constant contact, immediate responses, and total availability. When you start becoming less available, you'll quickly identify which category each of your relationships falls into. The people who truly love and respect you will understand when you need space. They'll appreciate that you have your own life, your own interests, your own need for solitude and reflection. The people who only value you for what you provide will become demanding, manipulative, or angry when you're not constantly accessible. This brings us to one of Jung's most important insights: the difference between being loved for who you are versus being used for what you provide. Constant availability often attracts people who want to use you rather than people who want to genuinely know and appreciate you. When you become more selective, you naturally attract people who are interested in you as a complete person rather than as a service provider. As we near the end of our exploration, let's talk about the long-term transformation that happens when you master this principle. Jung observed that people who learn to manage their availability become more charismatic, more influential, more respected, and paradoxically, more genuinely helpful to others. They develop what he called centered presence. When they are available, they're fully present. When they're not available, they're guilt-free and focused on their own growth and development. This centered presence is magnetic. People are drawn to individuals who seem comfortable with themselves, who don't need constant validation or approval, who have interesting lives and perspectives beyond just serving others' needs. These people become natural leaders because they've learned to lead their own lives first. Jung's final insight on this topic is perhaps the most profound. Your relationship with availability is a microcosm of your relationship with life itself. Are you living reactively, constantly responding to external demands? Or are you living proactively, making conscious choices about how to spend your precious time and energy? The people who master strategic unavailability aren't selfish or uncaring. They're the people who've learned to value their own life enough to protect it, nurture it, and use it consciously. They understand that they can't give what they don't have, so they make sure to fill their own cup first. When you stop being constantly available, you don't lose your relationships. You transform them. You don't become selfish. You become self-aware. You don't hurt people. You teach them to value your time and presence. You don't become less loving. You learn to love from a place of abundance rather than desperate need. The next time someone demands your immediate attention, remember Jung's wisdom. Your availability is not a given, it's a gift. Treat it as such and watch how everything in your life begins to change. The people who matter will respect your boundaries. The opportunities that align with your values will find you, and most importantly, you'll finally start living as the authentic, empowered individual you were always meant to be.